Get in on the action and make your bet with Sports Interaction. The F1 schedule is heating up. Will you go with the reliable and Max Verstappen, or take your chance with a potential surprise? Download the app in Ontario. Use the QR code you see at the bottom of your screen somewhere, or head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN to get started. 19 plus, please play responsibly. Welcome to Nailing the Apex. I'm Tim Haraney. Please head on over to Spotify. Give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts as well. Write a review as it really helps us grow the show. You can follow me on social media at Tim Haraney. Joining me to go through the Monaco Grand Prix in a wild Indy500 from the Scuderia F1 pod, it's Mark Dailey. Mark, how are you?
I'm doing really, really good, thanks, Tim. What an exciting Sunday, man. There's been so much good stuff to watch all weekend.
Oh, yeah. It's been good. If you want more from Mark, you can get him on social media at Scuderia F1 Pod. Let's start with Red Bull. Actually, we'll start with the Monaco Grand Prix, obviously. We'll start with Red Bull, in particular Max Verstappen, because I want to touch on his qualifying lap and all of this, but I just want to get your take on this, Mark, because I think I think what we saw this weekend from Max Verstappen was really the complete driver. I don't know how you feel about that, because usually we're used to seeing Max being uber aggressive, but in qualifying, he had to be uber aggressive. But in the race, it all came down to patience.
Yeah, it did, right? And the interesting thing about like the whole weekend, like you said, it was just like the complete drive from Max. And I mean, let's not forget that before he set that pole time, Fernando went out there and set a time that I don't think anyone expected that Max was going to be able to beat, because Max was not setting like any purple sectors in Sector 1 and Sector 2. And then somewhere in that Sector 3, which is the shortest of the three segments at Monaco, somewhere he finds this magic and then beats Fernando's time by, what was it, like 8,000ths of a second or hundredths of a second? Yeah, 800ths of a second. Just brilliant stuff. And again, today on Sunday, again, brilliant stuff for Max. I mean, you always get like a little bit of pushing and shoving when you go down into turn 1 in Saint-Deveau, but he kept out front and he had a little bit of, I wouldn't say luck, but man, did he make those medium tires last or what? Talk about amazing tire management.
I would say, so I did a TikTok on Verstappen's pole-winning lap, and I was going through some screen caps that I'd taken off of his onboard camera. And I was looking, like zooming in to see how close he was getting to some of the barriers, and like where was he making up a lot of the time on Fernando, because everyone was like, oh, he was great through the swimming pool. And yeah, he was. He was excellent through the swimming pool, and you can gain a lot of time back, but that's actually not where he gained all of his time back. He gained most, or if not all of the time back in the braking zone into turn 18, and then also at the apex of turn 19.
Wow.
Because if you zoom in on that, he is literally like a millimeter from just ripping the front right corner off of the car. And then coming out of 19, he was able to just get back to the power sooner than Fernando was. But again, he drives it all the way out to the wall. And at that moment, I'm looking at it, and I'm like, this guy was so aggressive that he was either going to crash, destroy this whole friggin' car, or he was going to get pole.
Yeah.
And I am dead set on the two different facts of Max Verstappen, where one, he's so freaking aggressive and committed, and then the other part of it, Dailey, is he had to have the patience and rein in that aggression throughout the race. You make a great point about that medium tire, man, because that thing was toast. That was absolutely toast. It was so grained up, and I don't know how he kept it out of the barriers once it started raining. Like, it was pouring, and he kept it off the wall, Dailey.
Well, I mean, considering Magnussen went to full wets and he couldn't keep it on the track even, it was just crazy, because, I mean, they said at the start of the race they were expecting the medium runners would be pitting somewhere from lap 30 to 38. And then there was this ongoing narrative the entire race that maybe there's rain coming in 5 laps or 10 laps, or don't worry, we might get a little bit of rain at the end of the race. And then some guys are getting the call from the pit, well, don't worry about it, it's not going to rain at all. And all of a sudden, it seemed like somebody just turned turned on a switch, because down at the back end of the track, before you go down into the tunnel there, you go down the hill through the hairpins. It's just like it was just pouring there, and then, you know, Fernando comes into the pits. He goes to pits for dry tires, which seemed like the absolute right call at the moment.
Yeah.
But before he even leaves the pit lane, it's right into the pit lane too.
Yeah.
And, you know, you could say, well, Max just kind of got lucky, but not really. I mean, there was a gamble in that. I mean, they gambled on running as long as they did without pitting to go to the hard tires, because I think that if it didn't rain, I think that Fernando and Aston Martin made a pretty brave call to go with the hard tires, and knowing that it was completely opposite to Max, who started on the mediums, knowing that he's going to have the softer, faster rubber at the end, where Max is going to have the hard tires too. And you could tell, because right off of the start, you know, Max, he's pushing, but he's not pushing as hard as he can. But you can tell is that gap, he's getting up to 11, 12 seconds, which is kind of what you would expect in that delta between the two tire compounds. So, you know, it was just interesting to watch.
I thought Sergio Perez had an interesting weekend. You know, stacking it up in qualifying is not an ideal thing to do, obviously. And for Sergio, who's trying to win a championship here, I mean, he's not doing himself any favors, Dailey. Like, he smoked that turn one exit wall. Like, he absolutely smoked it. And the amount of speed the guy was carrying in to the turn was, because like when I watched it in real time, I was like, holy hell, he was just hauling ass through there, man. Unbelievable. Didn't have a great race. I mean, obviously when you're starting at the back, it's going to be super difficult to claw your way back, and it's just unfortunate because, you know, like most, I really want to see Sergio put up a fight here, Dailey.
Oh yeah, totally. But like you say, like Max, he was either going to put it into the wall or he was going to take pole. I think that Sergio had pretty much that same aggressive mindset as his teammate did.
It was Q1 though, right?
Yeah,
I know.
It was too much. It was too much too soon. It's just like, dude, like, you know, all you have to do is just make sure you're not in the bottom five, you know, 2 times, and you got the car to do it. I mean, you basically have to just go out there, set an okay lap, and you're good. You know, you don't need to worry about setting the fastest time or anything like that. Save that for the, you know, maybe your second flying lap if you're really gonna like throw something down. But you're gonna get, you know, 2 pretty good shots in Q3. But I mean, if you don't even get out of Q1, I mean, forget it. And then it was just, I mean, talk about some weekends where everything goes right and weekends where everything go wrong. I mean, he was just like, after that incident in qualifying, it just, you know, just kind of degraded and kind of fell apart slowly from there, didn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Fernando Alonso, I mean, he was happy with coming home P2 at the end of this race. I think, you know, the team tried to be aggressive with going on the hard compounds, but yeah, Verstappen was just too much. He was too fast for them this weekend, Dailey. I think not even, like, I think he could have gone a little bit longer on the hard tire, but again, you then, you know, you're rolling the dice at certain points when it comes to team strategy. I mean, I think they did well not to get past coming in for that second stop. I think they did well.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially
that could have gone really, really wrong way. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, especially like I was gonna say on a track like Monaco, where basically everything's a roll of the dice as it is. I mean, if you start kind of going too far off script, I mean, it just you know, ends up that something might go wrong. You might inadvertently shoot yourself in the foot just trying to get like a little bit too fancy, right? Rather than sticking to the strategy. And, you know, I don't know how to put that, but I think you kind of get the gist of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, like one of the things that, you know, by bringing him in as early as they did, I'm not going to say they brought him in super early because they didn't. They pitted him in around the right time. It's just the fact that if you're going to send him out on inters at that exact moment instead of putting him on the medium tire compound, it's difficult to put temperature into the intermediate tire. So if you go too early on that intermediate tire and there's not a lot of rain or standing water, but the track is kind of dry, you run the risk of really, driving a ton of heat through the tire and just putting it over its edge too soon. Because once you start to get that, what it's called thermal degradation, heating from on the inside, you're kind of screwed. So, that was a difficult sort of window, I think, for the team to navigate. I think they just came up with the best option that they had because they didn't think it was going to rain as hard as it did on that outlap that he went out on. Difficult weekend for Lance Stroll.
Oh, I know.
Man, that was a tough one. I think just getting the confidence with the car in the first few sessions and then finally getting that confidence. We saw what he could do in Q1, and then in Q2 he got damage to the floor of the car, and that compromised his entire Q2, and that's basically why he didn't advance to Q3. The team felt that he was fast enough to get to Q3 if it were not for the damage, because the damage disturbed the car a lot. But that being said, I mean, his Aston Martin held together pretty good during the race, man. He was being aggressive. It was good stuff. I think one of the things, just trying to get past, Kevin Magnussen there for a while, that's tough. It's going to just hold your race up. And yeah, once you qualify that far back in Monaco, it was always going to be difficult.
Yeah, the term recovery drive seems like it's got a bit of a different meaning there, because unless things go really, really, really well, to even claw back to get like a point or two, like in sort of those bottom point pains position, is about the very, very best that you can hope for. But it's too bad because, if you looked at Lance, I mean, he was looking pretty racy there, but you look down, it's just like the battle for 14th or something like that. And it's just, it's a real shame because, like you say, the pace was with the car. And I just wanted to ask you, though, we were just talking about the inters and not being able to generate enough energy and get it. Is that kind of what we saw with Lance going into, was it Portier or whatever it is, going down that hairpin just before the tunnel, where he went around the first hairpin and just kind of skidded off and hit the barrier? Because it looked like the car, I mean, obviously there's a lot of running water going down that hill there, but it just looked like he turned the wheel and nothing happened until it was too late.
Not enough heat.
Not
enough heat into the tire. I mean, it was it's interesting to see. I mean, even if you're on, for example, like a slick tire, you could see how fast everybody wanted to get off the slick tire once it started to rain, only because it sucks the heat right out of the tire, and then essentially you're losing all of that performance. So it makes things very, very difficult for drivers. Ferrari. Actually, we'll go to Mercedes because of where they ended up with. Actually, let's go to Esteban Ocon. You know why? Because he kicked some ass this weekend, man.
He did.
That guy was incredible. What'd you think?
I thought it was great. I thought it was really, really good to see, and I couldn't help but think, looking today, I'm looking at the results here. So we got Esteban in P3 at the end of the race, got Pierre Gasly, his teammate, finishing P7. So not only do you have a podium, but you have two cars in the top 10 at Monaco. And I couldn't help but thinking, does Otmar go home tonight feeling like a little bit justified after Laurent Rossi called him out in the media, like, was it 2 weeks ago, basically saying like the team is performing like crap and they're not doing what they we're expecting them to do, which is fair enough. But I mean Esteban, I loved it. I thought that he drove a super race. It was great to see and watch, not just him, but both Alpines kind of out there and fighting for something meaningful, because this was a team we've kind of been expecting to kind of mix it up with the top 3-4 teams. So it was nice to see them up there. But yeah, I got to give him a lot of props for what he did this weekend, and to get on a podium in a place like Monaco. I mean, he kept his nose clean, and I thought he just drove a really, really good race.
Yeah, and he had damage to his car from the hit with Carlos Sainz, but he was able to keep it together for the remainder of the race. Did affect a bit of the performance of the car as well, but I think they boxed him at the right moment. Now, as for Pierre, it was interesting. he's extremely disappointed, and he was confused as well.
Really?
At the end of the race, yeah, especially with Alpine's strategy and the strategy call that the team made. I think he felt that P3 with the rain coming in, was for him the perfect scenario. But I think for him, he feels that the team could have achieved a P3 and P4 if they had have thought about pitting him at a different time. They told the team, told the team he wanted to stay out when the rain started, and he didn't want to pit. So that's interesting to hear that, simply because Alpine has, as like you had mentioned, kind of been under the radar from upper management in terms of the performance. But I think for Otmar Safnauer, coming into Alpine last season, it's been tough from the standpoint that he's got to come in and kind of make this thing his own and to turn things around internally. And to do that, it takes years. It doesn't really take a few months. It takes a few years to do that. And by a few years, I mean probably 4 to 5 years for him to really turn everything around. And I think like one of the things that he's done well is that he's actually designed and developed with the team a great way of getting parts to the car as fast as possible. I remember last season, Alpine, they were one of the teams that had the most turnover with parts, where every single weekend they were bringing new components to the race car instead of just bringing these, half big upgrades or really big upgrades to the race cars. And I think for them that really worked, because you can actually see them making improvements as the season kind of rolled along. And now doing something similar, there are now other teams that are copying that philosophy. And one of those teams is Ferrari. They're doing something similar, where they're, instead of it offering up a huge upgrade, they're bringing small upgrades at a time. I think that's a little bit more smarter, because you can actually have an understanding of what you actually have. Unlike Mercedes, who brought a massive upgrade for this weekend. It was the upgrade they were supposed to bring for Imola. Dailey, what did you think of this thing? I mean, they don't really have a full scope on where it is in terms of performance. They're not going to get that until they get to Spain, like I've said in this podcast a million times. But George Russell, at the end of this thing, told us he was kicking himself because one small mistake costed him a podium. What do you think about that?
Well, life's a game of inches, right? But it's funny. I did get a chance to follow it up, but I did see a quote this afternoon where Mercedes were reflecting, saying that the car now isn't awful; it's just simply not good. So I guess that's progress, but it looks kind of funny to see now that the W14 has side pods after a year and a half of no side pods, that they've finally gone away from that. But yeah, it's funny though. Just in general, it's just. Yeah, they didn't get on the podium. Mercedes, that is. Ferrari didn't get on the podium. They were sort of kind of fairly anonymous, both teams, during the race. I mean, George only really kind of made the headlines because he was noted for possibly being in an incorrect starting position on the grid. And then once the rain started, Lewis was saying, he said something about being too slippery. Maybe you should red flag this thing. And, it just, they weren't really, they just kind of filled the spots in between, right? So I could see why, you look where the two Mercedes, Hamilton 4th, George 5th, and then you got Leclerc in 6th, and then Gasly. You can kind of see now, I could put the pieces together with Pierre's comments that he feels like they could have both those Alpines in P3 or 4, at least both in the top 5, because I thought it was a fairly anonymous race from both of them, but. If George feels like a podium got away from him, that's fair enough. I don't know if I still think Esteban would have had the better of him. I really do.
Lewis still feels the upgrades have gone in a positive direction. At least that's what he said post race.
Yep.
But it's a huge result for them nonetheless. Shocking, really. I didn't expect to see Hamilton or Russell that high up at the end of this race. And yeah. I agree with you. Russell thinking he could have been on the podium, or P3, I think, might have been a bit of a might have been a bit of a stretch. I mean, Carlos Sainz was pretty fast this weekend. Charles Leclerc, this guy can't catch a break, gets a penalty for impeding Lando Norris in the tunnel on Saturday in qualifying, so he gets a 3-place grid drop. So, I mean, the guy's got no luck at his home race. Dailey finishes P6 in the race, but I feel bad for him. I just do. I know I shouldn't, but I do.
I know I sometimes feel the same way about like Charles, because I mean I just feel that once the cork comes out of that bottle, there's no looking back. We're talking about him in the same way, like winning races that we talk about Max or like Lewis or any of these other top drivers, and he is a top driver. There's no doubt about it. But it just seems that, I don't know, karma's got it in for Charles Leclerc at Ferrari. It just seems one way or another, something always comes back and bites him. It's either the car, it's the strategy, it's something he does himself. It's just like, it seems like there's always something going on. Because you got to think, out of all the 20-something races on the circuit, like you say, this is his hometown race. He grew up there. I'm sure he could like drive around that track with his eyes closed and still throw down eye-wateringly fast lap times. But you know, like after the last 2 years, you know, qualified on pole, I think going into this week is like, man, is this the year that Charles finally pulls it off? And then, you know, pretty quick that became, odds probably aren't going to go his way unless something dramatic happens during the race to shake everything and flip it up, which, you know, we almost saw, but it didn't really get that crazy out on the track.
Charles Leclerc, P6, his teammate Carlos Sainz, P8. Carlos has every right, I think, during this race to be frustrated with his team. I think at some point there was a way that Sainz gets a podium in this race. He felt that he could have gotten a podium in this race at the same time. But again, Dailey, Ferrari strategy just really doing in their own driver. I don't know what to say about this team. Like,
I know,
frustrating, man. Like, if you look, like Fred Vasseur's brought in as team principal back in January. It's been almost 5 months. There's been heavy turnover at the team. Been a lot of restructuring behind the scenes, which is fine. That's what, you know, as a new team principal coming in, that's what you got to do. But when one of the main reasons you're brought in is for the mistakes that have been happening, how are these mistakes still happening? It's like the strategy department is just not confident with what they're doing anymore. Like, I don't understand it. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me because you're Ferrari. You're a world-class team. It doesn't make sense to me, man. Like, I think they dropped the ball on this one in terms of trying, like, getting this podium. I think they could have had a podium today, and they lost out on it.
Yeah, I don't know. What do we say now that we haven't said before, like many times over the course of a number of years? But again, sure, like Fred comes in January. So what can he have an influence on that's going to make a difference immediately? The car? No. The car is basically all done and ready to go, ready to hit the track for testing in Bahrain at the, for preseason testing, right? Organizationally, sure, you can start making some changes, but you can, like, how quick are you going to be able to lure the organization to decide that, okay, this needs to be reorganized. We got to get rid of those people. We need to bring in more people over here to help these people do whatever they're doing, whatever it is. So that takes time to analyze, like, the structure and the workflows and the whole culture of the company and the team and stuff like that. But the one thing you would think, the one area that he could have immediate influence upon is the stuff that's happening in the garage, on the pit wall, these calls that are, that they're, the essence of what their plan is on a Sunday. And that's what I don't understand, because, if you go and read Ross Brawn's book, Total Competition, he always treated every job as like a 3-year project. The first year you're in there to learn the organization. Yes. Second year you go and you start making the changes. In year 3, you expect like those seeds to start poking out of the ground and you got something to work with. So I understand like those bigger changes might take some time, but yeah, like those, these calls that we still see them making that just don't make any sense. It's just to me, I'm like, why do they not see what everybody else sees? It's just like, and they're the ones with all the data. They're with it's their cars. It's just like I don't know. I don't know what to say at this point. I really don't. It's a big sigh. I'll finish up that thought with because you've got that big exasperated sigh there, frustration, Tim.
I mean,
is that Carlos on the radio when they're telling him the gap to Hamilton, he's just bleep this, bleep, bleep, bleep. I don't care about Hamilton because Hamilton's behind me. I think that kind of summed up the frustration.
Yeah, no, he's right. Let's talk about McLaren.
Yep.
Both drivers scoring points. Lando Norris coming home P9, Oscar Piastri P10. Really solid stuff from McLaren, and they're starting to get back into this thing. Now, Lando Norris, he doesn't think, they're... Like, he doesn't even think it's possible at this moment to take any fight to Alpine. Because they're about a half a second, I believe he said, faster than McLaren in qualifying, but it's been so far a pretty good recovery by them, considering how they started the season, Dailey. I mean, they've managed to do quite nicely over the last little bit here.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'd say in general, I'm a little disappointed with like a little sort of like a little touch of frustration, but I mean, it's trending in the right direction. I mean, the first couple of races, right out of the chute here at the beginning of the season was just like, ooh, if this is what we're going to see from McLaren this year, this is going to be a long year for McLaren. Yep. But I mean, like you say, they're slowly working their way back into this thing, and to get both cars into the points, a double points finish this weekend, I think that's really solid. I mean, if Lando's, if he's aware of that, and that seems like, okay, we got a half a second that we got to close with Alpine. Okay, maybe that's something that you can focus on, something you can work on, but celebrate the successes where you have them, and then focus on the next target down the road. So I think that's something that's workable. I mean, half a second, I mean, I know in racing terms that's quite a bit, but also, I mean, Alpine doesn't seem like a team that's really been out developing or out performing anyone else. So to me, that seems like a bit of a doable target. So I would hope that they take the last couple of performances, especially today, and kind of build on that going forward, because we got a lot of racing coming up, Tim. Despite some of the cancellations we've seen, there's a heck of a long way to go before we get to Abu Dhabi at the end of the year, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There is a ton of racing, and that is something that we should all take note of, because, I mean, even though Verstappen has a massive lead, so does Red Bull, and they'll probably hold on to all of that, but at the end of the day, these teams are going to claw back all of this performance. These teams are definitely going to start closing the gap down to Red Bull and also each other. McLaren has another big upgrade that will be coming before the summer break, and then they're going to have another big upgrade coming after summer break. Alfa Romeo is a team that actually has rebounded quite nicely lately. Valtteri Bottas coming home P11, and Zhou Guanyu coming home 13th. I'm actually quite surprised to see how well they've been able to bounce back. I mean, they actually looked pretty solid when they were in Miami, and I actually didn't think they were going to be this quick this soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I thought it was going to take a bit longer.
Yeah, no, that's good to see as well, because like Alfa Romeo, like, is a team that I think we're going to see that this team has like a bit of an identity crisis over the next couple of years, right? Because they're Alfa Romeo right now, and then in 2026 they're going to be Audi, and then in between they're going to be something else, So I assume that maybe it's going to revert back to Sauber or something like that before it becomes like Audi proper in 2026. And I know there's a long way before like Audi kind of really makes their stamp really felt on this program, but I can't help but think at some point before this becomes like an out and out true works team that it's going to benefit from the Audi relationship or oversight or whatever you want to call it, the arrangement, until this becomes like the proper works team a couple years down the road. It's interesting, right? I mean, again, like just like McLaren after the first couple of races, I was thinking for Alfa, Alpha is the same thing. Ooh, this is going to be a long season for these guys as well. But I wouldn't, consider where they started from. I wouldn't turn my nose up at P11 and P13. It's progress.
Absolutely not.
They're going in. They're trending in the right direction, which is important.
I'll just roll through this pretty quickly here. Nick DeVries, P12. Not bad result for Nick. Alexander Albon, P14. Yuki Tsunoda was in the points and was driving one hell of a weekend. He ended up coming home P15, so sucks for Yuki. Sergio, we had mentioned, P16. Nico Hulkenberg, P17. Interesting news about Haas that actually had come out from, I believe it was Racing News 365, and it was earlier on Sunday morning, and they tweeted out that, quote, Alfa Romeo are set to join Haas in a title deal for 2024. Racing News 365 has learnt the deal could rise to as much as $20 million per annum after the Sauber deal ends after the 2023 season. Now,
that's interesting.
That's coming from Racing News 365. Haven't heard anything else on that, so not too sure where it sits, but they're reporting it, so I don't know. What do you think? I mean, it only makes sense, obviously, because Haas has the relationship with Ferrari, and Alfa Romeo is a part of the Ferrari FCA brand, so it only kind of fits, I would say.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, as soon as like the whole Sauber Audi thing became, official, it just kind of made sense, or it was logical that why would Alpha, still be involved? They can't be involved at this point, but it seems like a logical tie-in considering that Haas has real estate inside the Maranello facility, and there is a pretty close working relationship between the teams. What I do find interesting is that the Alfa Romeo partnership that they have with Sauber is basically, it's just a branding exercise. They're not putting any resources or anything in there. So just from a pure marketing point of view, I find it interesting that they're, should this bear fruit and this should become a reality, that, they're still willing to, and they're still interested into pumping in that sort of money into Formula One. But it'd be a great win for Haas. That would be a pretty cool tie-up for them to get. So who knows?
Yeah, definitely top them up on the cost cap for sure.
Yep.
Logan Sargent, P18, he had a tough race. Whew. And Kevin Magnussen, P19, DNF'd, and we already talked about Lance Stroll. So let's move over to IndyCar. If you didn't see it, the 107th running of the Indy500 from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Dailey, what did you think? I mean, this was such an awesome race.
Oh, man, it was good, right?
So good.
Yeah. I mean,
so good.
You don't have to be a fan of IndyCar to sit down and watch the 500. It is just like, it's like appointment TV. It's like the Super Bowl, right? It's just like, you got to block off that time on, that last Sunday in May to sit down and watch the 500. And boy, did this race not disappoint. I mean, there was action as soon as they went racing, and it pretty much kept up the entire time, that entire 500 miles. It was great. I really enjoyed it. I mean, the end, man, that end was just, it was crazy. It was so chaotic. I mean, cars going all over the place. There was 3 restarts to, and 2 red flags at the end there. But boy, what an exciting finish. And man, hats off to Joseph Newgarden. I mean, that move that he threw right at the end there, perfectly timed. I mean, boy, I mean, you couldn't plan it any better if you tried. It was amazing.
I found it, interesting that so the move at the end, so if those want to go back and watch it or just go and watch the highlights, the move that Newgarden does at the end when they're coming out of turn 4, so the last turn at IMS, he kind of snakes down towards pit lane, but what he's doing is he's snaking and he's actually crossing the solid white line, pit entry line. And so last year, Marcus Ericsson did something similar, and then they called it the Dragon, because Simon Pagenaud was one of the first ones to actually really do it, and IndyCar didn't penalize them for it. And so now, since they're bolting on so much more downforce onto the Indy cars, they're having to try and find ways of breaking the tow. And so when you're coming to the start-finish line to take the checkered flag in the Indy 500 and you've got someone right on your ass, Newgarden does the snake, the dragon thing. So he goes and he crosses the pit lane, the white line, and that's just enough to break the tow from Marcus Ericsson. It's a controversial move, though, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the thing is that IndyCar, they're not going to penalize it, but at the same time, I know the drivers are like, look, you're going to have to call it fair for everybody. So if you're not going to call it, for Ericsson, if you're not going to call it now for Newgarden, then you can't call it a penalty. So I would be interested to see what happens next time we return to the Indy 500 if that's not a penalty, because at some points it looks awfully dangerous, and at the same time, I mean, you're kind of going over the pit lane rules at that point, and it gets a little...
Well, especially, I don't know if you saw the one replay of the last lap there. Like, I think the camera must be at the end, like the inside end of pit lane, because it's going backwards, like up pit lane towards past start finish. And when you see them come around turn 4 back into the start finish straight there, and you see them all whip over there like that, I mean, maybe it's just the camera angle, but it looks really, really extreme compared to some of the other different camera angles that you have, like around the track. I mean, that one I thought was really cool, because you see when he comes in around turn 4 and like whips down and back up and then on to start finish there. It looks, I mean, it is dramatic. I mean, it's crazy stuff.
Marcus Ericsson wasn't happy at the end of the race because they decided to, restart it with, essentially one lap to run. And I think for Ericsson, one of the things that's upsetting him the most was, obviously when they threw that last red flag, he was in the lead. So again, being in the lead at that moment actually is kind of working against you, because you have the other cars that are in your tow, and they're going to have a better advantage if they're able to go flat out through the last few corners on cold tires, and that's the driver having to risk doing that, and Newgarden did, and so Ericsson lost. So Ericsson's upset from the fact that they did that because he felt that it was dangerous in a few different scenarios, but one of them being not having enough tire temperature in the tire. But at the end of the day, I mean, this has happened to other drivers in the past, right? He's not the only one. He's not going to be the last one. And this is just the way it is. And you finish second. And that's what you just got to deal with it, man. Like, that's what it is. This is car racing, and that's IndyCar.
Yeah, that's the nature of the beast. But I mean, you can see why he would be like kind of ticked off about it. I mean, he was literally inches away from repeating as winner of the Indy 500. So you can understand why the emotion is high and why he'd be upset about it. But
definitely,
as cruel as it sounds, it's just like, dude, you just got to move on. 100%. I mean, you can't hold anything against Joseph Newgarden. I mean, there's limited time, and I mean, I was on my feet watching it at home. I think everyone around the track was on their feet watching it. It was just exciting, especially after we had a couple of those false starts there. It's like, we're going to have 10 laps of sprint, and they got whittled down to like 7 laps or whatever it was. And it's like, we're going to have 1 lap of racing to sort out the winner of the 500 this year. And it was pretty crazy, but
so good, man.
Yeah.
Good.
I had to go for a nap afterwards. I was way too overstimulated.
Some really great drives out there today. I can't touch on all of them because we just don't have the time. But Santino Ferrucci for AJ Foyt Racing, incredible drive. Good for AJ Foyt Racing. Well deserved. Shame they didn't get to win. That would have been an incredible story. I believe it's been like 24 years or something like that since a Foyt car last won the Indy 500. Yeah,
wow.
I believe it was Kenny. Wow. It was Kenny Breck, I believe. I remember.
I was going to say, was AJ himself still driving?
No, I mean, like, yeah, for those who don't know, I mean, the guy who owns the team is also an Indy 500 legend.
But he raced until he was pretty old, by, like, did he race into his 50s or something like that?
Oh, I have no idea, man.
It seemed like that guy was around forever and like in a car.
Time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alex Palou obviously starting on pole and then getting taken out by Rinus VeeKay during a pit stop. I mean, talk about bad luck, right? Like, I think Alex could have really been in the mix for the win, but recovering to finish P4 is still nonetheless extremely impressive.
Yep.
And Alexander Rossi coming home P5, Scott Dixon P6, Takuma Sato P7, Connor Dailey P8, great drive from him. Colton Herta as well, P9. Colton recovering from his run-in with Romain Grosjean in pit lane. And what the hell was Grosjean thinking? Like,
I don't know. That was just like... That was like the ultimate head scratch. I mean, it's got to be the ultimate sin in motor racing is taking out your teammate. So I mean, what's the only thing you could do worse than that? Take your teammate out in pit lane? But I mean,
I feel bad for Roman too because he's had a rough season. He's been in some positions to win, and it just hasn't gone right for him just yet. But I have a feeling he's going to be able to capture a win at some point this season. He's right in the neighborhood, Dailey. Every single race he's been right there. He's been just knocking on that door. And Rinus VeeKay coming home in P10, finishing off the top 10. That was an incredible Indy 500. If you didn't see it, try and find a way of rewatching it. Maybe head on over to TSN and checking out race replay if there is one. We have some Twitter questions from Double Waved Yellow. Have we jumped the shark on needing to finish under green at all costs? Artificially instituted green flag finishes too often feel more competitively unsatisfactory than a full course yellow safety car finish. I can't help feel it's gone a bit too far. Look, you have people who show up to watch a car race, and you're wanting to make sure the on-track entertainment and spectacle is entertaining and is a spectacle at the same time. Is it still a sport? Yes, it is, because they're having to still race each other. So, I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, I disagree, because if you go down and you take, for instance, I was watching it with some people, and when that last red flag came out, they were like, there's no way they can end this epic race like this. And that is from people who don't always tune into IndyCar, don't always tune into motorsports, and don't always tune into the Indy 500. And those are the people you need to also want to get on board to watch your sport. Dailey, thoughts?
Yeah, totally. I understand and appreciate the perspective, but I think you just nailed it. It's just it was a great race, and I mean, under normal circumstances, we're not going to see that many red flags at the end of the race. I mean, we've seen it before where we have somebody goes into the wall or there's a crash or whatever in the closing stages of the race. But I mean, it was just, I don't know, it just lent something to this race today. And I couldn't help but thinking too, man, this would be a real shame if they finished behind the safety car, and brought it across to the checkered flags that way. I mean, I don't know, say if, there was another legitimate reason that the weather was bad, it started raining, and they thought, well, instead of calling the race, we want to just finish behind the safety car. Okay, well, maybe, sure, but I understand, but still, 2 laps of racing to decide the winner, and basically a 2-lap shootout, I think is for me a lot more rewarding than just kind of cruising behind the safety car for a couple laps, just knowing, okay, Pato's going to win this one, or Joseph, or Colton, whoever, right? Just it becomes anticlimactic, and I think it sometimes works against you. I mean, we've seen Formula One have lots of criticism for similar situations, right? Or I guess Belgium was a completely different thing with behind the safety car for 2 laps in the extreme rain. But yeah, I don't. I think they made the right call. It's just there was too many guys had incidents right in those last 10, 15, especially in the last 10 laps. That I think just maybe, exacerbated things or maybe, makes, it brings the topic up. But I think it's a good topic to talk about. Sure.
Absolutely, yeah. From Parth Lad, Adrian Newey had the 1,000-yard stare going when Perez crashed during qualifying. How much do you think Red Bull is concerned by having their floor on full display to the other teams? Will this affect the development war over the course of the next few months? That is a great question, and you are absolutely right. It is going to, for sure. Do you know how much those photographers are getting paid for those photos right now?
Yeah.
A ridiculous amount, and good for them because they deserve it. Let me tell you something. The floor of that entire Red Bull, even I was picking it apart. I was like zooming in on all the photos, like checking this thing out. And I'm like, wow, this thing is incredible. So, yeah, you can bet that there are people out there, especially the teams that are breaking that down. I bet you they started on Saturday night, Dailey.
Oh yeah, I mean, for the photographers that have like those original high resolution pictures, like they're making some bank right now, and good for them, like you say. But the 1,000-yard stare because Dewey was upset. I mean, but just apart from giving showing that floor to the entire world, which is the last thing that they would have wanted. I mean, there's the other thing too. Is he starts at the back of the grid. He had a terrible race. He wasn't in it. Maybe he had a shot at getting some points here and there, but I mean, Fernando's only 12 points behind Sergio in the drivers' championship. Max, I think, has like 140 something points. Sergio has 105. Fernando is 93, and then there's quite a bit of daylight between himself and then what is it? Is Lewis fourth in the championship? I think he is. Anyways, but I mean, I'm looking at that now. It's like I've been enjoying watching Fernando and what he's been doing this year, but it's like, okay, he's not going to catch Max, but he could certainly catch Sergio. So it's on. It's on, and that's going to be fun to watch, man. I think that's going to be great.
100%, man. I think this could change everything. Like, this could teams can claw back so much performance now after getting a good hard look at what's going on underneath there. It was awesome. Dailey, thanks very much, man, for doing this. Really appreciate it. Let everybody know what you got going on and where they can find you.
So you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We're the Scuderia F1 Podcast. 2 shows a week, Fridays and Sundays. And then you can also find us on Twitter, Scuderia F1 Pod. And it was awesome. Loved it, man. Loved the chance to finally sit down and talk some Indy with you, because it seems every time we do it, I'm like, I didn't get a chance to watch the race. But 500, like I say, it's appointment television. It's a must watch.
It is awesome. Thanks very much, man, for your time. Really appreciate it. I'm Tim Hauraney. If you want more from me, you can get me on social media at Tim Hauraney. Please head on over to Spotify. Give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts. Write a review. Let us know how we're doing, because it helps us a lot. And we'll be back later on this week. We'll talk to you all then.